June 24th, 2005, the last time anyone saw the bright, hopeful smiles of a Texas couple named George and Pat Smith. What began as a dream honeymoon cruise to the Mediterranean, a joyous celebration of new beginnings, would devolve into one of the most perplexing and tragic maritime mysteries of the 21st century. Their story, a chilling testament to the vulnerabilities that lurk beneath the veneer of luxury, would captivate and horrify in equal measure. On that fateful evening, the newly wedded pair were aboard the Royal Caribbean International's Brilliance of the Seas, a colossal vessel designed for pleasure and relaxation, not for the abrupt disappearance of its passengers. They were halfway through their 12-day itinerary, sailing between Greece and Turkey, an expanse of azure waters that would soon hold a far darker secret than its shimmering surface suggested. The Smiths had spent their day in Kusadasi, Turkey, enjoying an excursion, and returned to the ship in high spirits, as attested by fellow passengers and ship surveillance. The evening unfolded with dinner, casino games, and drinks, culminating in a late night spent at the ship's disco. This was the last confirmed activity before the eerie silence descended. At approximately 4 a.m., a steward on the Brilliance of the Seas discovered a crimson smear on the ship's hull, several decks below the couple's cabin. It was a peculiar detail, one that would, in retrospect, scream of alarm, but at the time it was merely an oddity. Was it a spilled drink, a clumsy accident? No one yet knew the grim truth it foreshadowed. Meanwhile, George and Pat were nowhere to be found. Their cabin, 90 August 2, lay empty save for a few undisturbed personal effects. The sheets on their bed were rumpled, suggesting they had indeed returned, but the couple themselves had vanished into thin air. The ship continued its journey, the rhythmic hum of its engines masking the growing unease. It wasn't until the next morning, when the Brilliance of the Seas docked in Rhodes, Greece, that the full weight of their absence began to press down. Their personal belongings, including Pat's purse and passport, were found in their cabin. George's passport and wallet, however, were missing. This detail, seemingly minor, would later become a crucial piece in a puzzle of betrayal and deception. The initial response from Royal Caribbean was, as expected, a search of the ship. Every cabin, every deck, every conceivable hiding spot was meticulously combed, yet yielded no trace of the Smiths. It was as if the couple had simply dematerialized, leaving behind only questions and a growing sense of dread. The captain notified the FBI due to the Smiths being American citizens and the ship being registered in the Bahamas, placing the investigation under international jurisdiction. The silence of the vast ocean, once a symbol of tranquility for the honeymooners, now seemed to mock the frantic efforts to find them. The FBI launched an immediate investigation, interviewing passengers and crew members. What emerged was a fragmented timeline of their last known hours, pieced together from witness accounts and security footage. The couple was seen at the casino, then at the disco, accompanied by a group of other passengers, mostly young men. This group would soon come under intense scrutiny, their actions and statements dissected for any hint of foul play. The initial theory, a common one in such maritime disappearances, leaned towards an accidental fall overboard, the open seas, the late-night drinks, the railings of a cruise ship, a recipe for tragedy. But as the investigation deepened, inconsistencies began to surface, cracks in the facade of a simple accident that would widen into a gaping chasm of suspicion. The reddish stain on the hull, initially dismissed, took on a sinister significance. It was too high, too isolated to be a simple spill. Could it be a sign of a struggle, of something far more nefarious than a drunken stumble? The families of George and Pat, back in the quiet suburbs of Texas, were plunged into a nightmare. Hope mingled with despair as they grappled with the incomprehensible reality of their loved ones vanishing from a supposedly safe environment. They waited agonizingly for news, for answers that seemed perpetually out of reach. The story, initially a local tragedy, soon garnered national attention, fueled by the unsettling nature of a disappearance at sea. The public, drawn to the sensational and the mysterious, demanded answers. How could two people simply disappear from a cruise ship without a trace? The world watched, breath held, as the FBI worked to unravel the threads of this bewildering enigma. The ocean, vast and indifferent, held its secrets close, but the relentless tide of investigation would slowly, painfully begin to pry them open, revealing a truth far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. What truly transpired on that ship in the dead of night remained cloaked in shadows, a testament to the chilling power of the unknown. But the shadows, as always, eventually yield to light, albeit a harsh and unwelcome one. The immediate aftermath of the Smiths' disappearance was a whirlwind of speculation and frantic investigation. As the Brilliance of the Seas continued its journey, leaving behind the immediate scene of the mystery, the FBI found itself confronting a labyrinth of conflicting accounts and baffling circumstances. The four young men who had spent the evening with George and Pat Smith quickly became persons of interest. Their names, Josh Askin, Lloyd Bothan, Zachary Krantz, and Rusty Cuck, would become intrinsically linked to the unfolding tragedy. They were questioned, their stories scrutinized, and their movements on the ship meticulously reconstructed. Each man offered a version of events, but the narratives were riddled with inconsistencies, small cracks that, when pieced together, began to paint a picture of something far more complex than an accidental fall. One of the most disturbing revelations came from a steward who reported hearing a violent altercation in the early morning hours around the time the Smiths were last seen. He described sounds of shouting, furniture being moved, and a woman's terrified scream. Crucially, this steward also stated that he saw four men, including those who had been with the Smiths, carrying what appeared to be an unresponsive body from the couple's cabin. He reported this disturbing observation to his superiors, but for reasons that remain unclear, his account was not immediately given the gravity it deserved. This information, if true, completely shattered the accidental fall theory, propelling the investigation into the far darker realm of foul play. The FBI, now operating on the assumption of a potential homicide, intensified its efforts. They reviewed security footage from the ship, a painstaking process that yielded glimpses of the group's interactions but no clear view of the crucial moments of the disappearance. The ship's security camera network, ironically, seemed to have blind spots precisely where answers might lie. The behavior of the four men raised red flags. They had reportedly been seen celebrating in the hours following the disappearance, a stark contrast to the despair that had gripped the rest of the ship. One witness claimed to have seen one of the men joking about George Smith's demise, a chilling detail that fueled the suspicions of investigators and the Smith families alike. The cruise line itself faced increasing pressure. Accusations of a delayed and inadequate response mounted. Why wasn't the ship immediately searched more thoroughly? Why was the FBI not contacted sooner? Why were the potential suspects not detained for immediate questioning? These questions, unanswered for too long, only compounded the sense of frustration and injustice surrounding the case. Back home, George and Pat's families refused to let the case fade into obscurity. They hired private investigators, launched public awareness campaigns, and relentlessly pressed for answers. They held press conferences, distributed flyers, and offered rewards, desperate for any shred of information that could bring their loved ones home, or at least provide closure. The family's unwavering determination kept the story in the public eye, preventing it from being swallowed by the vastness of the sea and the bureaucratic machinery of international investigations. The narrative of the honeymooners' disappearance became a rallying cry for improved cruise ship safety and accountability. It exposed vulnerabilities in maritime law and the fragmented jurisdiction that often complicated investigations at sea. The public was outraged by the idea that a couple could simply vanish without a trace from a supposedly secure environment, highlighting the urgent need for stricter regulations and more transparent protocols. The physical evidence, though sparse, was meticulously analyzed. The reddish stain on the hull was indeed confirmed to be blood, later identified as George Smith's. This discovery eliminated any remaining doubt about the violent nature of his disappearance. It confirmed that George had suffered some form of trauma, likely within or near his cabin before his body entered the water. But the blood provided no further clues as to how he ended up in the ocean or who was responsible. Divers were dispatched to search the waters along the ship's presumed route, a monumental task given the depth and vastness of the Mediterranean. The hope was to find a body or any additional evidence that could shed light on the events of that night. But the ocean, as always, proved a formidable adversary, yielding no immediate answers. The search efforts were extensive, yet ultimately fruitless in the initial stages. The currents, the marine life, and the sheer volume of water made any recovery operation incredibly challenging, if not impossible. The families were left with the unbearable weight of uncertainty, the torment of not knowing where their loved ones were or what truly happened to them. The investigation stalled, bogged down by jurisdictional complexities, the vastness of the sea, and the uncooperative nature of some witnesses. The four young men, despite their suspicious suspicious behavior and inconsistent stories, were never formally charged with any crime related to the Smiths' disappearance. They retained lawyers and largely remained silent, adding another layer of frustration to an already agonizing ordeal. The narrative of George and Pat Smith transformed from a missing persons case into a chilling true crime saga, a testament to the fact that even in an age of advanced technology and global interconnectedness, people could still vanish without a trace, leaving behind only echoes of their presence and a lingering sense of profound injustice. The initial optimism of finding the couple alive slowly dissipated, replaced by a grim acceptance that a tragic end had befallen them. The question that lingered, a dark cloud over the shimmering Mediterranean, was not if they were gone, but how and why. And the answers, it seemed, were buried deep, waiting for a serendipitous turn of events to bring them to the surface. 6 years later, the ocean would finally offer a clue, one that would redefine the entire narrative and shatter all previous assumptions. Years turned into a torturous silence, the case of George and Pat Smith growing colder with each passing season. The initial frenzy of media attention gradually subsided, replaced by the persistent, aching void in the hearts of their families. The official investigation, hampered by the lack of definitive evidence and the frustrating complexities of international maritime law, seemed to reach an impasse. The FBI continued to monitor the suspects and pursue leads, but without a body or a clear crime scene, the case lingered in a disheartening state of limbo. The four young men who were with the Smiths on their last night maintained their innocence, offering no new information that could break the stalemate. Their lives, though forever shadowed by the Smiths' disappearance, continued, a stark contrast to the perpetual grief and unanswered questions endured by George and Pat's loved ones. The families, however, refused to surrender to the silence. They transformed their grief into relentless advocacy, campaigning tirelessly for legislative changes to improve safety and investigative protocols on cruise ships. They formed foundations, lobbied politicians, and became vocal champions for other families who had experienced similar maritime tragedies. Their efforts were instrumental in pushing for the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act of 2010 in the United States, a landmark piece of legislation designed to enhance security, improve crime reporting, and ensure better accountability for incidents occurring on cruise ships. This act, though it came too late for George and Pat, served as a poignant legacy, a testament to their families' enduring love and unwavering fight for justice. The vastness of the Mediterranean, the final resting place for George Smith, continued to hold its secrets. The shimmering surface, once an idyllic backdrop for a honeymoon, had become a symbol of the immense, indifferent power of the ocean to both conceal and eventually reveal. The hope of finding George's body or any significant piece of evidence dwindled with each passing year, replaced by a somber resignation. The image of the couple, smiling and full of life, became a haunting contrast to the stark reality of their unknown fate. Then in May 2011, nearly 6 years after the Brilliance of the Seas sailed into infamy, a serendipitous discovery shattered the quiet despair. A commercial diver exploring the seabed near the coast of Turkey stumbled upon a startling artifact. Resting amidst the ancient ruins and marine debris at a depth of approximately 100 feet, he found a piece of fabric. It was peculiar, unlike the typical detritus of the ocean floor. Upon closer inspection, the diver realized it was part of a bedsheet, and then he saw it, a human bone, tightly wrapped within the fabric. This was not just any bedsheet. It was clearly a cruise ship bedsheet. The implications were immediate and chilling. The diver contacted authorities, and a specialized recovery team was dispatched to the location. What they found would send shockwaves through the ongoing yet dormant investigation. Embedded within the tightly bundled sheets, secured by what appeared to be rope and cable ties, was a partial human skeleton. The remains were carefully recovered and sent for forensic analysis. The news traveled quickly, reaching the FBI agents who had dedicated years to the Smith case. Hope, a fragile commodity after so much time, flickered back to life. Could this be George Smith? The location of the discovery near the coast of Turkey was significant. It was along the route the Brilliance of the Seas had taken on that fateful night in June 2005. The depth at which the remains were found also offered crucial insights. It suggested that the body, if it was George's, had been intentionally weighted down to prevent it from surfacing. This detail dramatically intensified the suspicion of foul play, moving the narrative definitively away from any lingering possibility of a simple accident. The forensic examination of the remains was meticulous. Meticulous dental records and DNA analysis confirmed the identity. The skeletal fragments belonged to George Smith. The discovery provided a horrifying yet undeniable answer to one of the central mysteries of the case. George had not simply fallen overboard. His body had been wrapped, secured, and deliberately cast into the sea, a chilling act that spoke volumes about the calculated nature of his demise. The weight of this discovery was immense, both for the investigators and for the grieving families. It validated their long-held suspicions of murder and provided a tangible, albeit gruesome, piece of evidence that had been missing for so long. But while it answered the question of what happened to George, it deepened the mystery of how and why, who was responsible for this heinous act, and what happened to Pat. The discovery of George's remains reignited the investigation with a fierce urgency. The focus immediately shifted back to the four men who had been with the Smiths on their last night. Their inconsistent stories, their suspicious behavior, and the steward's ignored testimony now took on a terrifying new significance. The blanket, the rope, the cable ties, these were not items associated with an accidental fall. These were the tools of a cover-up, the grim hallmarks of a crime. The ocean, which had silently guarded its secret for so long, had finally surrendered a piece of the truth, a truth far more chilling than anyone could have initially conceived. The narrative had shifted irrevocably from a baffling disappearance to a confirmed murder, leaving a trail of unanswered questions and a renewed determination to bring those responsible to justice. The discovery was not an end, but a terrifying new beginning for the investigation, a somber resurrection of a case that had long haunted the annals of maritime mysteries. The forensic analysis of George Smith's remains offered a grim window into his final moments. While the ocean currents and marine life had taken their toll over 6 years, the skeletal fragments still bore silent testimony to a violent end. Forensic anthropologists meticulously examined the bones for signs of trauma. Although extensive decomposition made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, the manner in which the body was wrapped and weighted down screamed of homicide. The presence of the bedsheets, rope, and cable ties around George's body suggested a deliberate act to conceal his remains, to ensure he would never be found. This wasn't an accidental fall. It was a calculated attempt to erase a life. This horrifying discovery galvanized the FBI. With concrete evidence of George's murder, the case was reclassified, and the intensity of the investigation escalated dramatically. The four young men, Josh Askin, Lloyd Bothan, Zachary Krantz, and Rusty Cock, were once again at the center of the storm. Their prior interviews, their inconsistent statements, and the disturbing accounts of their behavior on the ship were all revisited with fresh eyes and renewed scrutiny. The steward's testimony, which had largely been overlooked in the initial stages, now became paramount. His claim of hearing a struggle and seeing four men carrying an unresponsive body from the Smiths' cabin took on an almost prophetic significance. Why was his crucial account not acted upon more forcefully at the time? This became a burning question, casting a shadow over the initial response of the cruise line and authorities. The re-examination of ship surveillance footage, though still limited in its scope, aimed to corroborate the steward's account and pinpoint the movements of the suspects in the critical hours after the Smiths were last seen. Investigators sought any fleeting glimpse, any subtle anomaly that could tie the four men directly to the crime. The FBI pursued a renewed strategy of intense questioning of the four suspects, hoping that the 6-year passage of time, coupled with the undeniable discovery of George's remains, might crack their resolve. However, the men continued to maintain their innocence, refusing to offer any significant new details that could lead to an arrest or indictment. They stuck to their original stories, a wall of silence that proved incredibly frustrating for investigators and the families. The families, upon learning of George's remains, experienced a painful mix of relief and renewed anguish. Relief that a part of George had finally been found and that their suspicions of foul play were tragically confirmed. Anguish because it meant a definitive end to any lingering hope of his survival and a brutal confirmation of the horrific circumstances surrounding his death. Pat's disappearance remained an agonizing open wound. If George was murdered, what became of Pat? Was she also a victim, or was she somehow forced into silence, or simply vanished without a trace, leaving her fate an even more chilling enigma? The absence of Pat's remains added another layer of torment to the Smith family's ordeal. The prevailing theory, now strengthened by the discovery of George's body, was that Pat had also been murdered or had somehow disappeared under equally sinister circumstances. Investigators speculated that if George had been killed in the cabin, Pat must have witnessed it, or at the very least been present. Her complete absence, therefore, pointed strongly towards a second victim of foul play. The concept of a cleanup operation emerged as a chilling possibility that Pat was removed or disposed of to eliminate a witness to George's murder. This theory, while horrifying, aligned with the meticulous way George's body had been wrapped and weighted down. It suggested a degree of premeditation and a cold-blooded efficiency that painted a terrifying picture of the perpetrators. The investigation expanded beyond the ship's immediate events. Detectives delved into the backgrounds of the four suspects, searching for any history of violence, any motive, any connection that might explain the horror that unfolded on the brilliance of the seas. They explored financial motives, personal animosities, and any other potential triggers for such a brutal crime. However, no clear, undeniable motive emerged that explicitly linked the suspects to a premeditated attack on the Smiths. The silence of the suspects, coupled with the absence of a weapon or a confession, continued to be formidable obstacles. The legal complexities of prosecuting a crime that occurred on international waters involving suspects from different countries further compounded the challenges. Justice, it seemed, was as elusive as the depths of the ocean. Despite the overwhelming evidence pointing towards murder and the clear identification of George's remains, no arrests were made directly in connection with his death. The FBI continued to build its case, meticulously gathering every piece of circumstantial evidence, every inconsistent statement, every unsettling detail. They knew that securing a conviction would require an airtight narrative, one that could withstand the scrutiny of a court of law in a multi-jurisdictional environment. The family's plea for justice grew louder, their voices amplified by the horrifying confirmation of George's fate. They demanded accountability, not just from the perpetrators, but from the cruise line and the various authorities involved. The case of George and Pat Smith became a symbol of the struggle for justice in cases of maritime disappearances, a somber reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly idyllic journeys. The investigation, revitalized by George's discovery, continued its slow, arduous march, driven by the unwavering hope that one day the full truth would finally emerge and justice, however delayed, would be served. The ocean had spoken, revealing a piece of the puzzle, but many more pieces remained submerged, waiting to be brought to light. The revelation of George Smith's murder, confirmed by the discovery of his remains, intensified the already profound pain and determination of his and Pat's families. But the discovery, while providing a brutal truth, did not bring closure. Instead, it deepened the mystery surrounding Pat's fate. Her absence remained a haunting question mark, a persistent ache that echoed through the years. The FBI's theory solidified. George was murdered, and Pat, as a potential witness, had also met a tragic end. The grim possibility that she too was thrown overboard, her body perhaps drifting far from George's or never to be found in the vastness of the ocean, became a heavy burden for her loved ones. The absence of Pat's remains, unlike George's, has left her family in a perpetual state of agonizing uncertainty. They continue to grapple with the cruel reality that they may never know her final resting place or the precise circumstances of her last moments. This type of unresolved grief, often referred to as ambiguous loss, is a particularly insidious form of suffering, leaving no clear path to healing. The public, captivated by the sensational nature of the case, continued to follow every development. The story of the honeymooners, once a symbol of joy and new beginnings, had transformed into a cautionary tale of the hidden dangers that could lurk beneath the veneer of luxury and escapism. The cruise industry in particular faced heightened scrutiny, with critics pointing to its perceived lack of transparency and accountability in handling passenger disappearances. The family's tireless advocacy for the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act of 2010 gained even more traction after George's remains were found. The law mandated higher security standards, better reporting of crimes at sea, and established clearer lines of jurisdiction for investigations. While it could not undo the tragedy of the Smiths, it represented a tangible step towards preventing similar incidents and ensuring that future victims' families would not face the same bureaucratic hurdles and agonizing lack of information. Despite the renewed vigor in the investigation, the legal path forward remained fraught with challenges. The absence of a confession, a direct witness, or a murder weapon continued to be formidable obstacles to securing an indictment and conviction. The circumstantial evidence, though compelling, might not be enough to satisfy the stringent requirements of a criminal court. especially considering the complexities of prosecuting a crime that crossed international borders and jurisdictions. The four individuals who were last seen with the Smiths continued to be persons of interest, but without definitive new evidence, the FBI found itself in a frustrating standoff. While civil cases and wrongful death lawsuits were pursued by the Smith families against the cruise line, and in some instances against the four men, criminal prosecution proved elusive. The families experienced victories in civil court, achieving settlements that acknowledged the suffering and injustice they had endured. However, these financial resolutions, while offering some degree of accountability, could never truly compensate for the loss of George and Pat, nor could they provide the definitive criminal justice the families so desperately sought. The passage of time also brought its own set of complications. Memories fade, potential witnesses become harder to locate, and the trail of evidence grows colder. Yet the FBI maintained the case as active, refusing to abandon the pursuit of justice for George and Pat. They continued to review cold case files, re-examine existing evidence with new forensic techniques, and explore any new lead, no matter how small. The image of the brilliance of the seas, once a vessel of dreams, became synonymous with the nightmare that unfolded within its confines. It served as a stark reminder that even in seemingly secure and luxurious environments, human malevolence can strike, leaving behind a trail of devastation and unanswered questions. The story of George and Pat Smith is a powerful testament to the enduring love of family, the relentless pursuit of truth, and the often frustrating complexities of justice in an increasingly globalized world. It is a narrative that speaks to the fragility of life and the profound impact of a sudden, inexplicable loss. The ocean, which holds so many mysteries, has slowly, agonizingly given up some of its secrets in this case. But for Pat Smith, the silence of the sea persists, a cruel and unrelenting testament to a life vanished without a trace. Her family continues to hold on to hope, a slender thread woven with memory and longing that one day the full truth of her fate will also be brought to light. The case remains open, a somber reminder that some mysteries refuse to be forgotten and some injustices demand an eternal pursuit of resolution. The story of George and Pat Smith continues to resonate, not merely as a tragic true crime, but as a chilling indictment of systemic failures and the enduring power of family resilience. Even after George's remains provided a harrowing, partial answer, the absence of Pat and the lack of criminal convictions have left an indelible scar on the lives of their loved ones. The legal battles waged by the Smith families were arduous, spanning years and multiple jurisdictions. While criminal charges against the four men involved remained elusive, primarily due to the complex evidentiary standards required for murder prosecutions and the international nature of the crime, civil actions provided a measure of resolution. Settlements were reached with Royal Caribbean, acknowledging shortcomings in their initial response and security protocols. These financial outcomes, though never enough to mend broken hearts, represented a public admission of culpability and helped to fund the family's ongoing efforts to advocate for cruise ship safety. The four men, whose lives became irrevocably linked to the tragedy, largely receded from the public eye. Despite intense scrutiny and lingering suspicion, without new direct evidence or a confession, the legal system could not definitively tie them to George's murder. Their silence, maintained through legal counsel, became a frustrating impediment to full closure, leaving many to wonder about the dark secrets they might still hold. The case significantly impacted the cruise industry, prompting a re-evaluation of security measures and emergency response protocols. The Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act of 2010, spurred by the relentless advocacy of the Smith and other victim families, brought about tangible changes. It mandated peepholes in cabin doors, higher railing heights, and stricter requirements for reporting crimes to the FBI. It ensured that victims' families would be notified promptly and that investigations would be conducted with greater transparency and urgency. This legislative victory, born from profound loss, stands as a lasting legacy of George and Pat, preventing similar disappearances from fading into obscurity without proper investigation. For Pat's family, the passage of time has been an agonizing exercise in suspended grief. Without her body, without a definitive answer to her fate, they are denied the rituals of mourning and the solace of a known resting place. And her mother, sister, and brother live with the perpetual question, what happened to Pat? Was she too thrown overboard? Did she suffer a similar violent end? The possibilities remain horrifyingly open, leaving a wound that can never fully heal. They honor her memory through continued advocacy, ensuring her name is not forgotten, and her story serves as a reminder of the fragility of life at sea. The FBI maintains the George and Pat Smith case as an active investigation, recognizing that technology evolves, new evidence may emerge, and consciences can sometimes be stirred. Forensic advancements continue to offer new avenues for cold cases, and the hope persists that a new lead, a forgotten detail, or a future revelation might one day bring the full truth to light. The story of George and Pat Smith remains a powerful narrative for true crime enthusiasts and legal scholars alike, a case study in how a dream vacation can morph into a nightmarish tragedy, highlighting the vulnerabilities that exist even in seemingly secure environments. It underscores the critical importance of robust security measures, international cooperation in law enforcement, and the relentless pursuit of justice for victims and their families. Their case is a stark reminder that the ocean, while beautiful and vast, can also be a silent accomplice to the darkest human acts, holding its secrets with an almost unbreakable grip. Yet the Smith family's unwavering fight demonstrates that even in the face of such profound mystery and injustice, hope for answers, however long delayed, can never be entirely extinguished. The waves continue to crash, the ships continue to sail, but the names George and Pat Smith now carry a weight, a somber echo across the waters, reminding us that some disappearances demand eternal remembrance and an unrelenting quest for the truth. Their story is a testament to the enduring human need for closure, a beacon in the ongoing fight to ensure that no one else vanishes without a trace and without an answer on the open sea.